Martin Devlin is a big fan of women's rugby, but the narrative that its popularity is exploding is a myth, he writes in this week's Playing the Ball column. Martin, thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Mitch, always a pleasure, mate.
So you've had a bit of a look at the women's game and how much investment is going into it at the moment. What have you found broadly?
Look, I found it's smoke and mirrors, and the Empress has no clothes on, to quote Hans Christian Andersen, that famous philosopher from days gone by when we were all kids. Yeah, look, I mean, let me establish it first and foremost that, look, I'm a great fan of sport in New Zealand and that. I want sport to succeed, and it doesn't matter what the game is, who's playing it or anything like that. But, you know, the point of this column is that you can't just throw money at something. You can't just want it to work. You can't just demand that every man who watches a TV and supports sport and watches sport watches your product. I mean, you know, if you think that that's the way to make it succeed, well, you're a moron. It's as simple as that. You know, what I think the women's game is seriously lacking, for a start, it's lacking numbers. It's lacking eyeballs on the telly. It's lacking fans in the stand. That's painfully obvious. And that's where the myth, I do want to challenge that, you know, New Zealand Rugby keep telling us, and there's several commentators who have a very, very well promoted voices, given the fact of what the actual reality of it is, who constantly tell us it's exploding in numbers and it's an overwhelming increase in playing strength and all this kind of stuff. Well, look, you know, over the last few weeks, you've had a great examples or great chances in New Zealand of the spectators being able to get out there and watch these games, the Farah Palmer Cup, and no one's watching them. I mean, and that's the fact of the matter is. I wrote in the column, look, 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a Waiheke Island Chatham Cup soccer match between Eastern Suburbs and Waiheke. There were more spectators that paid to catch the ferry and then the bus to Waiheke and then at the end of Waiheke Island than across all the FPC matches across the weekend. So first and foremost, let me say that this isn't a criticism, but what it is actually, again, pointed at New Zealand Rugby. And, you know, who's saying you've thrown $48 million at this, so we're told. Where's your strategic plan? Where's your marketing plan? You know, because these women deserve better. And, you know, my point to CEO Mark Robinson is don't blame the players like you were happy to throw the All Black players under the bus. You know, the women are playing the game. That's what the athletes do. It's up to you to provide a business model that is actually going to be workable and sustainable. And New Zealand Rugby are completely absent on this. And I don't think it's really very fair on the women that play. And it's also not fair on, to me, a lot of other sports, you know, all the other sports that women are involved in and playing in the country, because, you know, I know no women are going to stand up and say this because they will be fear of being beheaded on social media. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that there's more women play football, there's more women play basketball, there's more women. What about the Kiwi firms, the New Zealand Women's Rugby League side? They don't get $48 million. Why is it that rugby gets this money? And if they're going to get given this money, well, then there has to be an end result, which is a hell of a lot better than what we're seeing at the moment. And I think, you know, for a lot of other women who play sport, they must be looking at this with envy, thinking, you know, you get the live TV coverage, saturation coverage all over Sky. You get, you know, your sport trumpeted all over the television news, and there's no one playing it, no one watching it, and that's the actual truth of it. You know, sure, there's playing numbers, but they're nothing like what we're being told. So, you know, I think really the question and the finger gets pointed at New Zealand Rugby. What are you going to do about this? Because you can't just sit there and pretend, because it's just too obvious. And I think it's a real shame for the women's game.
There's an argument, though, that you need to invest to grow the game, right? And you need to be putting this money in, and some would perhaps argue as well that this sort of money is long overdue, but you're saying the money itself is fine, there's seemingly no plan on the other side of it?
Well, where is the marketing plan? Where is it? You know, first and foremost, who do you want to be watching these games? What are those people doing now? What are the demographics of those ages and stages that you actually think should be your spectators? Why aren't women watching this product? Why aren't women going to these games? You know, you can't just sit there and scream at male rugby fans and say we should be watching. Why aren't women turning up? So, you know, there's a real disconnect here somewhere, and I'm raising it. It's the one big sacred cow in New Zealand sport, Hamish, that you're not allowed to talk about. You're not allowed to critically analyse. And so I'm quite happy to put my hand up and say, well, I don't believe that. I believe that, you know, if you want to be professional and you want to be considered professional, well, then you have to be professionally theorised, criticised, analysed, like all the other sports that we look at. And
what is one thing that you think New Zealand Rugby could do to grow the game or to increase?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd say I'm not answering that unless I can invoice you. There are people there that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for this, Hamish. I've got a few ideas that I think would really work, but I'm not going to give them away for free. You know, you hand out cash all over the place. Pay me and I'll come along and I'll sit there and I'll sit at a meeting, consult and give you one or two things that I think could improve it straight away. But I'm not going to tell you over an interview like this. It's not my business to. It's their business to get this right. They employ enough people to do this. They've got professional marketing managers. They've got professional this, professional that. and yet no one's watching, no one's going.
What
And
are
look,
you?
I'm not saying this in a Schadenfreude way, because I said I really, I watched the Black Ferns play on the weekend, and thought that what a magnificent performance. But as Wayne Smith said, they should have scored 100 points against them. And so, I think the quality of the product, not all of it, but I think some of it is actually really, really good to watch.
What are your
My question is, why
expectations
have
for
you not watched
the Women's Rugby World Cup later this year?
Well, I think that the problem that we've got, given how weak Australia are as competition, and you also got to remember, despite what we're all trumpeted and told, rugby in Australia is the 6th or 7th or 8th most popular sport to play. So, you're not going to get the peak of their athletes playing this sport either. And if all we get is Australia to play, I'm not so sure that they're competitive enough for us at the moment to make such a difference. Our women have got to go up against England and France, who buried us, 2 times each last year. We saw that. And so maybe that, we're going to have to achieve this in-house, which is a really, really tough ask. I got massive hopes, of course, because we're the reigning world champions, and playing on our home soil, makes it so exciting, makes it, even, I suppose, more pressure to actually perform in front of your own audience. But just by wishing for this doesn't actually happen. The best thing that ever happened to them is they put Wayne Smith there, which is an absolute genius idea. And I think he'll really shake that team around. Significant also that he said in an interview with me last week, he said that the first thing he's drummed into the team is humility. So when you don't get selected, you don't throw a wobbly, you actually get on with it. He said you can sulk for a night, and then you come back and you actually support your teammate and make sure that teammate has got absolutely everything that they need to play. Which I don't know whether that's a pointed reference to things that have happened historically in the past, but it sure sounded like one.
Martin, thanks very much for your time.